and Rooks was doing it as a piece of strategy to put Leclerc in a nutcracker between two teammates. Van Lacker crossed the finish line 34 seconds clear to give Belgium its first victory in the Classic since 1978. The two others began to sprint for second place, with Leclerc climbing straight down the middle and Rooks out to his left. The road should have been clear for Rooks, but just behind the finish line, a long line of photographers, reporters, officials, and simple onlookers jutted directly into his path. Luckily, Rooks was racing with his head up and spotted them. He swerved away, losing ground as Leclerc crossed the line ahead of him. Nobody was hurt. It was difficult not to think then about Finney, an acclaimed sprinter, the best in America and one of the best in the world. With a big laugh, he tells about the attendant at a ski lift who did a double take when he saw his scarred face. He asked, "What happened? A cat scratched you?" "Yeah," he said, "and you know what kind of cat it was. A jaguar." Rudy Denens does not fool himself about his slight gifts and limited ambition as a professional racer. "Laurent Fignon wins more than I do, probably because he expects more of himself," Denens said of the rider then ranked number 1 in computerized standings of the world's leading 600 professionals. Entering April with the Tour de France 3 months off, Denens ranked number 169. The problem is not only talent, but also luck, and nobody knows as much about bad luck as Rudy Denens does. There was the stage in the 1989 Tour, for example, when he broke away alone and had the race won until the final curve, 400 or 500 meters from the finish line. "I took the corner too fast, maybe, or something happened with my wheel, maybe, and I slipped," he recalls. "I still don't know." His bicycle went out from under him, and he was thrown to the road. By the time he got to his feet and found that his rear wheel was mangled, he could only scream in rage as the rest of the pack shot by. From an easy winner, Denens became the last man across the line. It doesn't happen often. "It just happened. So what can you do?" he asked quietly as he lounged in his motel room, awaiting the Paris-Roubaix race. "It just happened. It just happened," he repeated. Victories come rarely to the 30-year-old Denens, a Belgian with the PDM team, and when they do, they are not often as prestigious as in the Tour. "In a race like the Tour de France, I can't hope to win every day," he acknowledged. "When you're a Fignon or a Le Mans, a Superman, you have all those days when you can win, the mountains, the time trials. But when you're a normal rider, you have maybe 12 days in the Tour de France when you can win." In fact, until then, the major victories of his 7-year career was in the stage of the 1986 Tour. The personable and hard-working Denens had come close in other races, including 4th place in the Het Volk in 1988, 7th in Milan-San Remo in 1989, 3rd in the Belgium National Championship in 1985, and 2nd in Paris-Roubaix in 1986. He nearly won the 1990 Tour of Flanders, finally finishing 2nd in a 2-man breakaway with Moreno Argentin, a renowned sprinter and a former world champion in the professional road race. "It was a good day for me," Denens said. "I was riding well in good condition, but I didn't have luck and had a fast sprinter with me. It would have been better to be with Fignon or somebody like that, somebody I could beat in the sprint, but I was with Argentin and had nowhere to go." The result was predictable. The Tour of Flanders victory was a major one for Argentin, 30, who has been struggling in the last few years but still manages annually to win a few small races plus a classic, Liège-Bastogne-Liège in 1985, 86, and 87, or the Italian National Championship in 1983 and 1989. "These guys aren't often good enough during the year, but when they're good, they win," Denens explained. "Like Argentin. When he's super, he wins. He's super maybe 4 or 5 days a year, but he wins 4 of the 5 times. I'm not like him. I'm always at the top group, usually in the front, but never win." And that's what's important in bicycle races. Denens was hopeful about Paris-Roubaix, which is known as the Queen of Classics because of its age, first run in 1896. Its distinguished list of winners, Coppi, Bobet, Merckx de Vlemen, Moser, Hinault, and Kelly, and its difficulty, run over 265 kilometers of flat land between Compiègne, north of Paris, and Roubaix. The race includes 57 kilometers of cobblestones on stretches along country roads and through a forest. These cobblestones, some of them huge and irregularly aligned, bounce the riders so roughly that aches and pains last for a week afterwards. Paris-Roubaix is nicknamed the Hell of the North because of its cobblestones and their setting in dirt roads. When they are wet, they cause spills. When they are dry, The first riders leave a trail of dust that chokes those behind. Punctures are commonplace. It's a lot of pain and misery, but it's like a heavyweight championship fight, said Michael Wilson, an Australian rider with Helvetia. You know you're going to get beaten up, but without that beating, you're not going to make the big money, so you've got to do it. Denens usually does well in a race because it demands the concentration he offers in place of talent. He dreams of winning Paris-Roubaix and has come close. In addition to his second place in 1986, he was third in 1987 and fifth in 1985. Those years, he primarily assisted his team leader, but in 1990, he had a rare chance to be the PDM leader, replacing Sean Kelly, who broke his right collarbone in a crash in the Tour of Flanders. I'm happy with that role because I feel the guys believe in me, Denens said. I'm on the other side now. We always have good riders on the team, and they have the best potential for winning. Plus me, I'm not the winning type. So I did it for them, and now the guys will do it for me. He understood the tactics to be followed. You need to stay in the front because of the crashes, narrow roads, and side winds. You have to be ready for a long race. In the other classics, the real start is later. In the Tour of Flanders, I start really riding after 160 kilometers, so the race begins with 100 kilometers to go. Here, after 90 kilometers, you hit the cobblestones and the race starts, and there are 160 kilometers to go. To win, you need luck. There are so many good riders in a race like Paris-Roubaix that the winner needs to be lucky. Up to a point, Denens had luck in the race the next day. He stormed through the cobblestone sectors near the front of the pack, managing to avoid most of the dust on a dry and windswept day, and dodged the riders on the ground in front of him. In the Fiat Arenberg section of the worst cobblestones, Denens was able to keep his bicycle under him, its tires unpunctured. As late in the race as Wagersard, with 50 kilometers and 7 stretches of cobblestones to go, Denens was still with the main group of riders who were chasing 3 breakaways. The gap narrowed to 40 seconds, and a handful of riders made it over to the lead group, but Denens was not among them. At the finish, in the Velodrome of Roubaix, he was 10 seconds behind, as Eddie Planckaert beat Steve Bauer by less than an inch in a sprint. It took some luck, Planckaert admitted. To me, winning Paris-Roubaix is like winning the Tour de France. I'll never win the Tour because it's too hard and too mountainous, so this race has to mean the Tour de France for me. Denens will never win the Tour de France either, and by now realizes that he will probably never win Paris-Roubaix. He recorded a fine 9th place among the 92 finishers, and as team leader should, he was first across the line for PDM. I was with a good group of riders, but when I attacked, nobody would work with me, he said. I took my chance and attacked and got near the leaders, but nobody would work with me. Today I had good luck. I might have won the race, but no, it'll never happen, I think. There was no reason to worry, Greg LeMond kept saying, especially to himself, as he got off to a slow and painful start in the new season. His celebrity status in the United States, Sportsman of the Year for both Sports Illustrated magazine and ABC TV's Wide World of Sports, television pitchman for Taco Bell fast foods, cost him weeks of vital training during the winter. One thing led to another, and I found myself overwhelmed. Too much to do, LeMond said of the commercial opportunities that followed his victory in the 1989 Tour de France. Having lived it up, LeMond was now painfully living it down. I'm hurting on hills, he admitted in March during the 8-day Paris-Nice race, in which he finished far down, more than 8 minutes behind the winner, Miguel Indurain of the Benestro team. I'm not bad, I'm just bad on the hills, LeMond said. He proved that a few hours later by finishing a minute behind the rest of his Z team during a long and hilly team time trial outside Saint-Étienne, riding over 45.5 kilometers of wintry countryside. LeMond stayed with his teammates until the final long uphill ramp, where he was left behind. It was hard, a little too hard for me, he said as he pulled a jacket over the rainbow-striped jersey of the World Championship. LeMond won that jersey a month after his second triumph in the Tour de France, which completed his comeback from a nearly fatal shooting accident in 1987. Remembering that long ordeal, he refused now to panic. No, he said hurriedly when asked if he was worried about his poor showings in races in Spain and France since early February. Last year, if I was riding this way or if I got dropped on a hill, I'd worry and get thinking whether there was something wrong with me. Now I know nothing's wrong. It's just a matter of getting the kilometers in my legs. I should be fine by May or June. Next year, each year I say next year, I want to train well in January and be in good shape when the season starts, but it never happens. Part of the problem was that when Le Mans returned to Europe on January 22nd from the 3-month layoff between seasons, he was far overweight. Some observers put the extra weight at 15 pounds, but Le Mans himself admitted to 4.4 kilograms, just under 9 pounds. He also reported that half that weight had since been lost. "I'm at 74 kilos now," he said sheepishly. "Still 2 kilos over my best weight. That's nearly 5 extra pounds to carry up each hill." He looked solid and explained that his extra weight was not fat but upper body muscle developed while cross-country skiing near his home in Wayzata, Minnesota. He trained hard during November and December, he said, mostly by roller skiing and riding cyclocross, but a slight flu and business obligations had then cut short his road work. "Everybody would like to see the world champion racing really well from February on, but my responsibility is to race really well in the Tour de France. As usual, that's my main goal." Before the Tour in July, he expected to ride in some of the April classics, the Tour de Trump, the Giro d'Italia, and the Tour of Switzerland. "I'm still hoping to win a classic, maybe Paris-Roubaix, but the two races I really want to do well in are the Tour de Trump and the Tour de France," he said. "The Tour de France for obvious reason, the Tour de Trump because it's at home." The pain and suffering that constitute the price of success were worth paying, he asserted. "I keep saying I'm suffering and it's hurting, but overall I can't complain. I'm extremely happy. I'm enjoying myself." 2 months later, he could not say the same. By early May, the only consolation left for Le Mans was gallows humor. Riding in the Tour de Trump before it reached its first serious climb outside Charlottesville, Virginia, Le Mans found himself pedaling next to a car driven by an old friend, Mike Neal, formerly coach of the 7-Eleven team, but now with Spago. "How are you feeling?" Neal asked. "Fine, just fine," Le Mans answered. "I'm going to attack on the next descent." Attacks like that, with Le Mans turning on the afterburners, had helped him win 2 Tours de France. But this was in another country, and besides, the legs are dead. "Actually, the only thing I'm good for is to attack from the finish line to the hotel," Le Mans admitted. "I'm tired, real tired." A few kilometers later, he proved his point. As the road went uphill, he quickly fell behind and struggled in at the end of the stage 26 minutes behind the leaders. With the Tour de Trump not nearly half over, he was far out of contention. The world champion trailed amateur riders from New Zealand and West Germany, not to mention second-string professionals from Europe and the United States. "I've started this year behind, and I feel as if I'm always going to be behind," Le Mans admitted in a despondent interview in Richmond. "I just haven't had any good period this year. Not one race I felt good in at all. I'm really disappointed. I never expected my season to start this way." As he well knew, the main problem was that it was not the start of the season. The professional year began in February, and Le Mans had not yet finished a race. Early in April, he left his Z team in France to return to the United States. He was sick, he said, and needed to recover and train far from the pressure he feels in Europe. The month at his home in Minnesota and at a training camp near Santa Rosa, California, did nothing to help him. "I was completely dead till about a week and a half before the race," he said of the Tour de Trump, which began May 3rd in Wilmington, Delaware, and ended 10 days later in Boston after covering 1,793 kilometers. "I was training, but nothing intense. Some days just 2 or 3 hours. I literally was crawling on my bike for nearly 4 weeks." His illness had not been diagnosed, he continued. He was tested for mononucleosis and hepatitis, but proved negative. All the doctors could report was that he had a virus. "I just can't believe I'm not making much progress in my training," he said, still covered by the sweat and dirt of his ride. "Everybody else is at such a high level of condition. I feel pretty lousy right now, and there's too much difference in ability out there." In addition to his lost training and illness, he blamed his approaching 29th birthday. "I think that's a big part of it," he said. "My last memories of easy conditioning were in 1985 and 86, a good 4 or 5 years ago. I'm getting older, and it's getting tougher to stay in top condition." At the same time the year before, he was also experiencing difficulty, finishing 27th in the first Tour de Trump. But the problem then was medical, basically anemia. Diagnosed during the Giro d'Italia, the condition was cured with iron injections. "I feel I'm in worse shape this year," Le Mans said as he began to strip off his jersey. He was still a few pounds over his usual racing weight. The Tour de France was less than 2 months away, and Le Mans knew it. Another victory would remove all the disappointment of his year so far. But as he said, I hate betting my season on winning the Tour de France. His strategy was to ride himself back into shape. If I can make it through this race and the Tour of Italy, I'm going to have a lot of good kilometers in me, he said. Either it's going to kill me and I'll never get good this year, or else I'll be very good. It's going to be one or the other. For the moment, he dared not guess which. No more mañanas, said Raul Alcala. No more 8th place like last year. This time I hope to win the Tour de France. Why not? I feel pretty good. I have a lot of motivation. Sure, why not? Speaking by phone from his home in Switzerland, the Mexican racer was offering the same upbeat assessment of chances that he gave in the United States after he won the Tour de Trump. Asked then if he thought he could win the Tour de France as well, he replied breezily, sure, why not? Now, a week before the Tour was to start in Futuroscope, the why nots composed a long list, as Alcala admitted. They included Pedro Delgado, Laurent Fignon, Greg LeMond, Stephen Roche, Gianno Bugni, Charlie Motet, Andy Hampsten, and Stephen Rooks. To that list of favorites could be added such outsiders as Steve Bauer, Marino Lauretta, Miguel Indurain, Fabio Parra, Sean Kelly, and Eric Brukink. A lot of good riders, that's for sure, Alcala conceded, but no one rider who's obviously the boss. Le Mans should have been, but he's still not riding like last year, so it's wide open race. Why not me? Sure, why not? Then 26 years old, Alcala seemed finally to have developed into the mature and steady rider that the 7-Eleven team hoped for when it signed him out of Monterrey, Mexico, in 1986. With a fine 9th place in his second Tour de France in 1987, and the white jersey of the best young rider, followed by victory that year in the Coors Classic in Colorado, Alcala appeared to be heading for stardom. It never happened, and his teammates blamed his preference for eating rather than training. In 1989, Alcala moved to the PDM team based in the Netherlands and enjoyed moderate success, winning a stage in the Tour. Always a strong climber, he had become an outstanding time trialer as well, winning the prologue in the Tour de Trump by a big 7 seconds. This is the first year I found a good position on a time trial bike, he explained. Mostly it's that I'm in good shape and have the right amount of experience now. As he knew, winning time trials was key to winning. The 1990 Tour had 5 races against the clock, including the traditional short prologue and a team time trial. My PDM team is riding very well, very strong, Alcala said. There'll be a big help in that time trial. In a major change from the previous Tour, the 1990 edition was to end by reverting to the usual mass finish on the Champs-Élysées, rather than a time trial like the one in which Le Mans had made up a 50-second deficit to nip Fignon by 8 seconds for the final victory. As is often the case, the final time trial was now scheduled on the next-to-last day at the Lac de Vassivere, where Le Mans recorded the first Tour de France stage victory by an American in 1985. By the last finish line, the field of 22 teams of 9 riders each was to have covered 3,392.5 kilometers in a clockwise journey around France and a splinter of Switzerland. Like many other observers, Alcala rated Delgado as the man to beat. The Spaniard won the Tour in 1988 and finished third the next year after a calamitous first 2 days in which he arrived 2 minutes, 42 seconds late for the prologue, time that counted against him, and then collapsed in the team time trial. Before the race left its start in Luxembourg, Delgado was down 7 minutes and could only regain half of them by the finish in Paris. Of the other favorites, at least 2, Fignon and Roche, had medical problems. Roche, an Irishman, still had not demonstrated that he was fully recovered from a knee injury that forced him to quit the 1989 Tour halfway through. Fignon had crashed in the Giro d'Italia a month earlier, badly hurting his back and pelvis, which cost him 10 valuable days of training. Bugno, the easy winner of the Giro in his native country, was Alcala's choice of a dark horse. If he keeps that form, we all better look out, the Mexican warned. Could Bugno keep that form? Would Fignon and Roche overcome their injuries? Had Le Mans recovered his best condition? Was Hampsten strong enough to last 3 weeks? Had Delgado bought himself a better watch? Was Alcala ready to bloom? Sure, why not? With what almost sounded like a growl, Greg LeMond confirmed in Futuroscope what those closest to him had been saying. I feel great, really strong, he reported. I'm confident. And here his voice turned throaty. Very confident. After an intense and painful series of races, the American insisted that he would be the man to beat when the Tour began. He was not alone in his optimism. "Greg is very strong, healthy again," his wife Kathy said. Andy Bishop, a friend of Lamont's and a rider for 7-Eleven, agreed. "He has much better form than he had even a few weeks ago," Bishop reported. "He looks good, he looks healthy, and his morale is really good." Paul Kirkley, the coach of the Helvetia team and Lamont's coach when he won the Tour de France for the first time in 1986, shared that view. "I saw in the Tour of Switzerland last week how he was regaining his form," Kirkley said. "He's as good now as he's ever been, I think. For me, he's the main favorite." Finally, Otto Jacomb, Le Mans' monsieur and confidant, gave a fingertip analysis. "When I know he's aching, he's not going to win. Now he has no complaints. He's in good health and strong. He tells me I feel power in my legs. I finish a stage and feel strong. From there we take off." Le Mans seconded all these opinions. "I'm better at this time than I was a year ago at the start of the Tour," he said. It had been another long way back. "I started from zero in the Trump," he acknowledged. He struggled through that race, finishing 78th, then went to the 3-week Giro Italia, where he reduced time lost in the mountains, but again was no real factor, finishing 105th. He had only one good memory of the Giro. In one stage, he had stopped to urinate at the side of the road, and just then the pack took off. Now, Le Mans knows how to read the unwritten code of professional bicycle racing, which says that champions are not attacked while relieving themselves. In a rage, he mounted his bicycle and caught the pack, worked his way to the front, and then attacked himself, going off on a 100-kilometer two-man breakaway before he was tired and was caught. That was a flash of the old Le Mans, and better was to come the next week in the Tour of Switzerland. In that week-long race, he was able to stay with the leaders and finish the race in 10th place. He went home then to Mark, Belgium, and continued training, often behind the motorbike driven by Jacomb. "I couldn't believe the speed I was hitting," Le Mans said. "We'd get to 80 kilometers an hour, and what I usually do is 60, maybe 70. Things are coming around." "I've suffered a lot," he continued. "I don't like being where I was, the world champion and Tour de France winner, sick and struggling. But I knew there was nothing wrong with me. Last year was harder because I didn't know where I was. This year was harder for everybody else than it was for me. The Tour of Switzerland proved something to me. In the climbs in the Giro, I lost 15 minutes each day in the mountains, but in Switzerland, I kept going, maybe losing a minute. I never really felt tired. I came out as fresh as when I started." Despite his optimism, Le Mans acknowledged that the Alps and Pyrenees would be a testing ground in the Tour. "You've just got to stay strong from start to finish in the Tour," he said. "You can try to gain a few seconds here and there, but it always comes down to the mountains and the time trials. I'm looking forward to them." "I'm feeling confident," he repeated, "really very confident." Then he went out and showed exactly why. As Le Mans admits, after a decade of being a professional, not too many races still motivate him. Of the few, the Tour de France ranks at the top of the list. In 1978, as a 17-year-old junior racer on his first trip to Europe, Le Mans met a boyhood hero, Jean-Claude Killy, the winner of 3 gold medals in skiing at the 1968 Olympic Games in Grenoble, France, and they spent some hours cycling near the ski resort of Morzine. Just then, the Tour of France went by. "It was my first sight of professional races," Le Mans remembered years later. "I won't even pretend that I thought to myself, someday I'll be riding in the Tour on that road. But sure enough, in 1984, I did." His first sight of the race enthralled Le Mans. "I was awed by how many people were watching, a couple of 100,000 spread along the course, and by how fit the riders were. They were like gods." He was one of the gods himself now, a 2-time winner of the Tour, a rider who had never finished the Tour off the final victory podium in Paris, 3rd in 1984, 2nd in 1985, 1st in 1986, and 1989. He hesitated to phrase it just this way, but he felt he was a rider who couldn't lose the Tour unless he had medical problems, as in 84, or worked for his team leader, as in 85, or was simply not present, as in 87, after he was nearly killed in a hunting accident, and in 88, when a tendon infection required surgery. When he rode healthy and for himself, Le Mans believed he had a mandate to win. He owed it to his talent. Wearing Dossard number 1 and the yellow jersey of the previous Tour's winner, Le Mans was last in the 198-man field to roll down the starting ramp and negotiate 6.3 kilometers through gusty winds sweeping across the arid plains of Futuroscope. He knew the time he had to beat. Thierry Marie of the Castorama team, a prologue specialist, had recorded 7 minutes 49 seconds, or 4 seconds better than the second-ranked rider Raul Alcala. For the prologue, Le Mans was alone in using yet another technical innovation, a pair of triathlete bars that rose in a horn over his handlebars and included the gear shifter. The new straight-up bars, which he gripped hand over hand, kept him in a tight aerodynamic tuck. "I could get much more power," he said afterward of the bars that he developed with Boone Lennon. The pair had also developed the extended triathlete bars that Le Mans used the year before to put away a Laurent Fignon doggedly riding toward the Champs-Élysées with standard handlebars. Le Mans had a history of introducing accessories, like sunglasses and the handlebar-mounted bicycle computer, for both of which he was ridiculed in the years before nearly everybody in the pack began using them. This time, nobody laughed. The lesson of the final 1989 Tour time trial had sunk in. To reinforce it, Le Mans clocked a splendid 7 minutes 53.14 seconds, or 0.05 of a second faster than Alcala for second place behind the untouchable Marie. Prologues are just a way of adding a day to a race, satisfying the sponsoring municipality, and usually mean nothing. This one was different. The message was clear. Le Mans was ready. "So you made it back to the Tour de France?" an acquaintance asked Andy Bishop. "It wasn't easy." "It sure wasn't," Bishop agreed. "First I had to drive to Lille, then fly to Nantes, and then we drove to Poitiers. A long day." For somebody with a degree from the University of Arizona in physics, plus a minor in Russia, Bishop can sometimes be slow. Then he got the point of the question and broke into a wide smile. Making it back was more than a one-day journey. Early in the year, Bishop almost sank out of sight as a professional racer. Instead of riding for the PDM team based in the Netherlands, rated first in the world in computerized standings, he rode in the spring of 1990 for the unheralded and low-budget American Commerce National Bank team. From his debut in the Tour in 1988 at age 23, he had dropped to the Phoenix Criterium and the La Jolla, California Grand Prix. It was a long way down and a long way back up, but Bishop made it. When the 77th Tour de France began, he was wearing number 84 as a member of the 7-Eleven team. Displaying nervousness, he finished the prologue in 128th place, 45 seconds behind Thierry Marie. "I hope to prove something here," Bishop said before the start. "Not to PDM. I'm not vindictive. No, it's more to myself. If you prove something to yourself, that will prove it to everybody." What he intended to prove was that he should not have finished the 1989 season without a single major professional team interested in signing him on. PDM declined to renew his 2-year contract after sickness, and a lack of competition led to feeble showings in races. "Part of it was my fault," Bishop admitted during the Tour de Trump, where he rode for the Spago team. "I realize now I didn't always work as hard as I should have, that I let my medical problems get the better of me." He rode the Tour de Trump in hopes of attracting an employer for the European circuit, and fulfilled that goal with consistently strong daily results and a victory after a long breakaway on the stage into Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Even before he finished a fine 13th place in the Trump race, 7-Eleven had signed him to ride in the Giro d'Italia. Back in Europe, Bishop flourished, and now he faced his second Tour de France, a race he remembered bittersweetly. He was considered too young and inexperienced to ride in the 1988 Tour, but was rushed into action as a replacement for Greg LeMond, who could not start because of his infected right shin. "I'm really excited because there's such an incredible difference between now and 1988, Bishop said. "Then I didn't know what to expect, and I was just dying the last week. I finished that tour, and nobody can take that away. But it's no fun when you're just trying to survive." He ranked 132nd when the race ended. "This is what cycling is all about," Bishop said, "and I have so much more fitness and strength than I did in '88. I can't wait." Claudio Chiappucci realized how easy it would be to gain the jersey with white and red polka dots of the Tour's best climber. There were just 2 climbs on the first stage, 138.5 kilometers from the high-tech tundra of Futuroscope out into pretty rolling countryside and then back to the theme park, and neither climb was demanding. First was the Bonneuil Hill, 18.5 kilometers from the start, with the Arkeny Hill 6 kilometers later. Both were rated 4th and least category in height, steepness, and difficulty. Nevertheless, they were worth points toward the climber's jersey, and over the years some middling climbers had arrived in Paris in the jersey simply by scooping up points on hills and moderate mountains. Chiappucci, who won the climber's jersey in both Paris, Nice, and the Giro d'Italia early in that year, knew that. He also knew that, because the Tour faced only one climb, again 4th category, on each of the next 2 days, the man in the climber's jersey wouldn't have much trouble defending it for a while. So at kilometer 6, off he jumped. Right behind the Italian rider with the Carrera team came Steve Bauer, a Canadian with 7-Eleven, Frans Massin, a Dutchman with Buckler, and Ronan Pensac, a Frenchman with Z. I knew that the morning stage before the team time trial is a good one to attack on, Bauer said later. Nobody really wants to chase and wear himself out before the time trial. For the next 24 kilometers, their lead ranged from 20 to 30 seconds. As he hoped, Chiappucci was first over the 2 hills, disappointing Bauer, who had also hoped to spend a few days in the climber's jersey. Massin's ambition was similar. He wanted to win the first bonus sprint at kilometer 34 and gain the green points jersey. Pensac was only along to show his face, he confessed. The year before had been a washout for him, and the Z-Team sponsor had publicly shown his loss of confidence in Pensac by replacing him as a leader with Greg LeMond. I just wanted to let everybody see that I was still around, Pensac explained. It was, in other words, a standard breakaway, with each rider having his own small reasons for attacking and nobody thinking big thoughts. All 4 of us were just rolling along, nothing fast until we turned it up a bit for the bonus sprint, Bauer remembered. Suddenly we were 2 minutes ahead. Behind them, the pack had given up the chase, and that was a mistake. By kilometer 40, the lead was up to 2 minutes and 50 seconds, and by kilometer 55, it was 5 minutes. At kilometer 87, the leaders sped through the town of Lussac-les-Châteaux more than 11 minutes ahead. The lead reached its apex of 13 minutes, about 10 kilometers from the finish, as the glass towers of Futuroscope glinted on the horizon. The pack woke up then and was able to reduce the lead to 10 minutes and 35 seconds as Massin went over the line first, followed by Pensac, Chiappucci, and Bauer. When the 2 bonus sprints and the time bonus for winning were factored in, Bauer was in the yellow jersey by 2 seconds over Massin because of the Canadian's better time in the prologue. 21 seconds behind Thierry Marie for 19th place against the Dutchman's loss of 35 seconds for 73rd place. For somebody who just wanted to remind the pack that he was still around, Pensac was both jubilant and baffled. I can't explain it, he said. How can you figure that they allowed us to get that far ahead? He was not alone in asking the question. The obvious answer was given by Gerard Rouet of Castorama, who said, the team that rows in the morning is sure to pay in the afternoon. Laurent Fignon, Rouet's teammate, shared that view. It was a trap, he said. 140 kilometers in the morning before the team time trial was too long. Over that distance, the team that leads the pursuit is going to have to really work, and in the afternoon it will pay, so nobody wanted to ride. Pedro Delgado had an explanation of his own. After an early flat, he had to work hard with his teammates to rejoin the pack, and then, with about 60 kilometers left, the Spaniard crashed, bruising his backside and right shoulder. Why had he crashed? The Tour was trying hard to keep it quiet, but there had been a demonstration by sheep farmers who were protesting a cut in government subsidies and increased lamb imports from other countries of the common market in Eastern Europe. Their real income, the shepherds explained, as they stopped reporters' cars by blocking the road with branches and bales of wool, had declined 15% in the last 3 years. The motorcycle police who traveled with the Tour got to the blockade pretty quickly and cleared a path. But somebody poured oil on the road, and Delgado was one of a dozen riders who lost control of their bicycles and fell. Bruised and angry, he was in no mood to chase down the attack. Greg LeMond understood both sides of the problem. If I was on another team, I would have panicked, he said. But since it was Ronan up front, it was up to the others to work. I understand Fignon's attitude. The team that leads the chase is sacrificing itself for the others. Predictably, some of the old-timers traveling with the Tour were outraged about the 4-man breakaway. In their day, they let it be known this would not have been allowed. In their day, riders worked for a leader, and only for that leader, not for themselves. In their distant and now irrelevant day, there were still rules. Thus, Luis Ocaña, winner of the 1973 Tour, recalled the start of that race. José Cato, my teammate, went off with Herman von Springel in the first race, trying to take the yellow jersey. That night at our hotel, I took my shower and went downstairs with my suitcase packed. I said to Maurice Demure, our coach, "You choose, him or me. A subordinate, you see, doesn't have the right to do his own number. And if I had been Le Mans when the breakaway reached 2 minutes, I would have made my team roll and wiped it out, no matter if Pensac was ahead." The old-timers knew how to deal with the ambitious domestique, Jeffrey Nicholson relates in his classic book, The Great Bike Race. When Johan de Muynx began attacking his Brooklyn team leader, Roger de Vleminck, in the 1976 Giro, he found himself isolated, even though he was in second place overall, trailing Felice Giamondi by just 19 seconds. In the deciding time trial, Brooklyn refused to have a team car follow de Muynx, who had to rely on a Belgian television commentator to carry his spare wheels. He did not make up the 19 seconds, and Brooklyn did not mourn the loss. Bernard Hinault, who rode a decade after Ocaña, when teams were beginning to turn away from domination by a single leader, was more reasonable. "I never would have allowed the attack to develop such a lead," he wrote in his daily column in L'Equipe. "The most they should have been allowed was 5 minutes." If Ocaña swore that the favorites had dug themselves a deep grave, Hinault went no further than to say they had committed a tactical error. Delgado was coming around to that point of view. "Maybe we've made a mistake," he said. "Bauer isn't going to be easy to bring back." Fignon disagreed. 10 minutes, that's a lot, but it's not everything. This year, Bauer isn't climbing well. Pensac can lose 7 minutes in the first-time trial, and Chiappucci showed his limitations in the Giro. You can't think of them as dangerous riders. Not everybody was so sure. For Cyril Guimard, Fignon's coach, the real threat was neither Bauer nor Pensac, but Chiappucci. That seemed strange, since Bauer had finished as high as 4th in the Tour in 1988 and had worn the yellow jersey and grown accustomed to its pressure. Pensac, too, had placed high in the Tour, 6th in 1986, 7th in 1988. But Chiappucci? At age 27 and in his 6th season with Carrera, he had a total of 4 victories, including a stage in Paris-Nice and in the Tour of Sicily. In 1989, he had finished a mere 81st in the Tour. He was not even the team leader with Carrera, a role reserved for Flavio Giappuni after he finished second to Fignon in an 89 Giro. Giappuni had done nothing since that race, and Chiappucci had been given the right to ride for himself. Perhaps Guimard had been impressed by his climbing ability in the Giro. Whatever the reason, if Guimard saw something, people went back for a second look. Since he retired from a moderately successful career as a racer and became a directeur sportif in 1976, Guimard had guided 3 men to 7 victories in the Tour. They were Lucien Van Impe in 1976, Hinault in 1978, 79, 81, and 82, and Fignon in 1983 and 84. His riders had won the Vuelta de España twice and the Giro 3 times. Le Mans, who often feuded with him, still said that Guimard was the one former directeur sportif of his he most respected for his sense of strategy. How important is strategy? Not too important to such fans as France's President François Mitterrand, who once explained professional bicycle racing to a visiting American academic by saying, "Strategy is arriving before everyone else." For the moment, that defined the 4 breakaways. This was as meaningless as a race could be. Platoons of riders leaving in 6 heats, with the times of the winners ranked to determine the overall winner of the inconsequential preface in a Tiro Adriatico stage race in Italy. Almost nobody cared how he did, except Stephen Bauer, who went all out and bettered the previous leading time by more than a minute. "You took it pretty seriously," an acquaintance told Bauer. "It was a bike race," said Bauer, a stern look crossing his face. "You have to take it seriously." The Canadian had been taking racing seriously since he decided that he was not big enough or fast enough to become a professional hockey player. The results had been impressive, including his wearing the yellow jersey for 5 days in the 1988 Tour before finally finishing 4th. After that high point, the season ended in catastrophe, as Bauer collided with Claude Criquelion as they both led the charge over the final 50 meters in the World Championship road race in Belgium that year. Bauer, who recovered to finish second to Maurizio Fondriest, was disqualified for actions deliberately unsportsmanlike and dangerous, in seeming to have elbowed Criquelion, causing him to fall as the Belgian was trying to pass on the inside along the crowd barriers. After the crash, Criquelion walked across the line, dragging his battered bicycle, and finished 11th. Once before, Bauer had come close to a major victory. In the 1984 Olympic road race in Los Angeles, he took the lead near the finish by passing Alex Grewal of the United States, who was staggering. When I caught him, I was tired, Bauer would remember years later, but I'd done a 1-kilometer flat-out sprint, and when I got him, I went by quickly. But if you look at the videotape, I kept going hard for an extra 500 meters, and he responded very quickly and was right on my wheel. It was like lightning hit him. Everyone thought he was dead, but he wasn't, not completely. They rode on together comfortably ahead of the pack, and in the final sprint, Grewal just managed to get across the line first. It was rare that Alexei and I would come to a head-to-head sprint, but normally, maybe 8 times out of 10, I'd beat him, Bauer continued. Obviously, he recuperated on my wheel and had that extra snap. That was all there was to it. The silver medal meant a lot to him and to Canada, he said. It gave my popularity a big boost and cycling's popularity too. Before, people didn't really know what cycling was all about. He was proof of that, he conceded, when he was growing up in Fenwick, Ontario, 90 miles west of Toronto. When his parents, both schoolteachers, gave him his first bicycle, an Eddie Merckx model, Bauer could not quite place the name. I sort of knew Merckx had won the World Championship road race in Montreal, but not much more than that. A month after the 1984 Olympics, Bauer turned professional with La Vie Claire and went to the World Championships in Barcelona, where he placed third in the road race to Criquelion. Coming third was just a reinforcement that I would be a worthwhile international rider, Bauer said. It gave me a lot of confidence that I knew I could win a big race. I didn't think that professional racing would be easy. You have to be realistic. No matter what race it is, it's never easy. The funny thing is that when you do win and look back on it, you think it wasn't so hard after all. But to get there is never easy. More than a few people expected Steve Bauer to lose the yellow jersey in that afternoon stage, the team time trial. Down only 2 seconds, Frans Masson had the Buckler powerhouse to tow him along in a discipline long favored by Dutch teams. His own director sportif, Jean Ras, had been a locomotive of the Raleigh team, now Panasonic, in the team race against the clock. Nevertheless, Bauer was optimistic. We expect to do really well in the time trial, he said as the 7-Eleven team waited in a huge parking lot to be called to the start line. We're looking for a finish in the top 3. That would have been astounding, as Bauer understood, but a team leader, especially when he is ahead in the Tour de France, is supposed to be optimistic. Once the 44.5-kilometer race began on a blustery and overcast day, Bauer had a hard time backing up his words. Showing the effects of the long breakaway, he was slow to contribute as each rider took a short pull at the front to set a continually high pace. A third of the way into the stage, Bauer grew stronger, and the 7-Eleven began moving. At the 20-kilometer checkpoint, the team was 6 seconds behind Buckler's time. From then on, the gap began changing, and 7-Eleven finally came in at 54 minutes 12 seconds, or 8 seconds better than Buckler. Bauer's prediction was off by 3 places as the team finished 6th and good enough to keep him in the yellow jersey. Immediately behind 7-Eleven in 7th place was Z, and its riders wanted only to talk about how strongly Greg LeMond had ridden. We were going like a 10-man team, not a 9-man one, Eric Boyer said. LeMond did the work of 2 riders. LeMond was continuing to send messages to the pack. In some quarters, the early breakaway on the stage before the team time trial is known as the Alex Stygia Gambit, so called for the Canadian rider with 7-Eleven who won the yellow jersey that way in 1986 and became the first North American ever to lead the Tour. Early in the stage, through the suburban sprawl west of Paris, Stygia, then 25 years old, jumped away. Before he was caught, he had won enough bonus sprints and minor climbs to wind up with 4 jerseys in addition to the yellow one. White for Best Young Rider, red for leader in bonus sprints, polka dot for Best Climber, and patchwork for Best All-Around Rider. Just super, wonderful, unbelievable, he said after his 85-kilometer jaunt. I went as hard as I could as long as I could. He was caught 10 kilometers from the finish, but hung on to take 5th place. His glory was short-lived. In the afternoon stage of 48-kilometer team trial, 7-Eleven finished next to last in the 21-team field because it had to wait for Stygia, who barely managed to avoid elimination as he struggled along. He was shot, wasted, explained to teammate Davis Finney. We were fighting a strong headwind, and after 20 kilometers, he had nothing left after his ride this morning. Stygia finished 3 minutes behind his team. From yellow jersey in the morning, he finished the day in 116th place overall. Worse, his performance helped humiliate 7-Eleven, which was clocked 6 minutes behind the winner and ahead of only the maladroit Café de Colombian team. Times had changed. From an American-Canadian-Mexican team in its first tour, 7-Eleven had bulked up with such good Europeans as Dag Otto Lauritzen of Norway and Sean Yates of Britain in addition to Bauer. A training camp to polish its skills in the team time trial shortly before the tour showed how professional the American team now was.